Jesus, no eye in the sky. Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are glad to have you with us for this episode. Well, we will be talking about the 2022 movie Tenet. But first of all, I want to let you know that we are brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. There's so many progressive Christian resources over there. We highly encourage you to go check them out. We also encourage you to check us out, the Moonshine Jesus Show, on Facebook and all the places you get your podcast. But more than anything, I want you to welcome with me my good buddy, Caleb Lyons. How are you, Caleb?
I am doing awesome. How are you doing today, Mark?
I am doing really well. I am ready to dig into Tenet, at least try to. But as always, we do need to remind people, this is not a spoiler-free zone. This is a spoiler-full zone. So be prepared for this movie to be spoiled for you. Honestly, I don't feel too bad about it this time. You've had a year to watch this if you were going to watch it. So you had a real opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious, though. This is always the case with these kind of shows or movies that weren't the most popular, and you have to go out and try to find out what your beverage is going to be. I'm really curious where you went with your beverage for this show, man.
Okay, yeah. So I was inspired by the protagonist in the show.
Yeah,
That's all we know
okay.
him as, right? The protagonist. What he drinks. And so he drinks.
Oh, we may have gone the same way on this.
He drinks Diet Coke, right? No alcohol on business.
Right.
So I'm not staying true to that. I do have alcohol, but I've gone with a classic, Mark, a Jack and Diet Coke. So in honoring him, I've got a Diet Coke. So I've got a Jack and Diet Coke here.
I kind of took the same direction you went. Early in the movie, we hear Neil, one of the other main characters, already know what the protagonist, the main character's drink is, which sort of gives a tip of the hat that somehow he knows about him, even though they're supposedly just meeting. I decided, again, like you, to go with a Diet Coke, and I've turned it into what I'm calling a time inverter. And it is Diet Coke, lime vodka, and a heavy serving of absinthe, because I figured that will help me invert time a little bit. So, we both went in a similar direction. So cheers to you, sir.
Hey, cheers, Mark.
Let's try these out. I'll do that again. How about yours?
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Well, we're going to continue sipping on these drinks, and in the meantime, we're going to have a little break here, and we'll come back and geek out a little bit about the show.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we are talking about Tenet, and this is our geeking out section. We'll geek out for a little while, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the theology and politics of the show. So Tenet is the 2020 science fiction, time travel-esque action thriller film directed and written by the one, the only Christopher Nolan, armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world. The protagonist journeys through the twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. So, Mark, you and I were chatting ahead of the show today, and we were both saying, hey, we watched this a couple times, and we're not really quite sure what happened here. And so here's a line that stuck with me, and I want to get
Yeah.
your reflections on this. As the protagonist is learning about Tenet, the Tenet scientist is teaching him about reverse time, and she says, "Don't try to understand it, feel it." Is that the best
Yeah.
advice for watching this movie? Not to try to understand it, just to feel it?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I really think it is because the more it's almost like the more you try to understand it, the more it escapes your ability to understand it. And in a lot of ways, that's Christopher Nolan, right? I mean, he is that he really always is playing with time and time directions and timelines, and frequently likes to have characters that are there in two different ways. And so, I mean, I have to say, there are times for me that this entire movie um, feels like a riddle, but it's a riddle like where they're both not telling you the question, nor are they giving you enough information to answer whatever the question happens to be. So maybe in some ways it's just supposed to be art, and art plays a very important role in the movie. So maybe that is like his little like tip of the hat to us to say, look, just treat this as art. Like I'm playing a lot of my favorite themes that you've seen in other movies like Inception and different ones. And so just experience this. Don't try to overthink it. The problem is we're doing a show on it. It's hard not to start to try to overthink it and figure out what the hell is going on and how do we talk about it. I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the audience complaints in general. I mean, this has one of the lower Rotten Tomato scores for Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan films, and I think that this is kind of the double-edged sword of Christopher Nolan and his
Mhm.
brilliance. Some of his movies are incredible and mind-bending, and some of them I think miss the mark a bit. And I would say that this film is similar to Interstellar in that it
Okay.
has this big concept that is maybe too big for the movie that's trying to contain the concept. Like
Mhm.
he spent 5 years working on this movie, right? Writing the script,
Mhm.
trying to get it all together.
Right.
And I'm not sure the movie really is the appropriate medium for this, or I'm not sure that I felt
Yeah.
like we really understood what was going on. It's one of those things where you can kind
Yeah.
of feel like I just watched 2.5 hours of a movie and I saw a whole lot of stuff. And I also feel like I didn't see very much at all. Like, what was the plot of that movie? What exactly did
Right.
happen? Am I off
Yeah.
base? Am I not
Well,
giving them
no,
enough credit?
I hear exactly what you're saying. I do think that Interstellar did a better job of giving us a little more of a linear time, a linear story where it wasn't flipping and folding back and forth on itself. I think that's one of the issues I had with Tenet. And maybe it's an issue that we're supposed to have because he's playing so much with timelines and he's flipping it back and forth, and you're re-experiencing scenes in reverse almost and trying to figure out how a character is re-experiencing it sometimes in two different ways. And so I do feel like that's I feel a little inadequate in trying to say why he did it. It's very
Yeah.
clear there was intent on it.
Well, see,
And there
that's
is a
good,
bigger
Mark. Because I thought maybe they just wanted to shoot the fighting scenes backwards. Like, oh, it's cool if like some of the fights were backwards and stuff. But you think it's very intentional.
it certainly seems like it is, and there's I was continually trying to grasp at what the bigger story was of why it was so important to tell these stories forwards and backwards, and maybe it has to do with trying to make us consider about the value of time and what time means to us in our present, and as we reflect on our past and what the future may be. I feel like there was a lot of commentary trying to be made about it. I'm not sure I was intelligent enough to fully grasp the message, honestly. Of what it was clear that he was trying to make commentary on the present, the past, and the future, and how they impact each other, and what that means in terms of who we are and how we interact with even our current moments. And we can get to more of that later, probably.
Yeah.
But I just felt like it was so fast paced and there was so much verbiage going on trying to describe it. I think your observation of maybe this wasn't the right format. What if we made this a series where we can take more time and investigate metaphysics and investigate time and quantum theory even, and talk about how it all impacts what's going on here? Might have been a better choice because it all happens so fast. Even watching it twice, I mean, ultimately, what I get is a story of the future is at risk because of climate change. And so they create the ability to not only go back in time, but to delete time. And they believe that if they delete time, that it'll fix the future. I mean, I think that's actually the real story here. Or
I
I
I I think
I
so.
don't know.
I think I mean I think one of the interesting things that points to what you're saying here about trying to understand this is that Neil is said to have had a master's in physics, right? And the
Mhm.
protagonist can't even understand exactly how any of it
Right.
works. And
Goes to a
yeah,
goes to a doctor and say, "Explain this to me. What the hell's going
yeah,
on?"
yeah. We don't really understand. Yeah, I think it's making a commentary on if we destroy the Earth so much so that there's no recuperating from it. To what lengths would we
Mhm.
go to restore rightness or
Right.
the human ability to survive? So I think you're right on that, and I would love to explore in our next segment more about like what that means for our future and climate change. But right
Mhm.
now, what I'm curious to know about
Yeah,
this, Mark, is that this is very reflective of Christopher Nolan's broader style. You know,
absolutely.
so I'm curious if you're a Christopher Nolan fan.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you have a favorite Christopher Nolan movie because his writing and directing style is very unique, and some people love it and some people do not. How
Yeah.
about you? Where do you fall?
He's kind of hit and miss with me.
Yeah.
Uh, if I have a favorite, it's either Inception or Stellar. Both of those I really enjoyed. I felt like they dealt with dimensions and time issues in a really well done way that was you could grab. You had to pay attention. You had to be there with them, and he tried to make statements in those that I felt like were important and made you think and be reflective. So I really enjoyed those. And I also say he's also just a visually a brilliant filmmaker. Like there are so
Mhm.
many things that are just they grab you instantly and you get kind of pulled into the movie visually. So for me, those would be the two that I would most say that I really appreciated immediately. Like Tenet, maybe if I watched it two more times, I would appreciate it more deeply. Like I really, it was a struggle. It was. How about you? I mean, are you a fan of his, and what films, if any, are your kind of go tos for him?
Yeah, so I like him, and I think primarily because you know this, Mark. I'm a huge Batman fan. I love
Hmm.
Batman, and so I
He
love
did a
the
great
Dark
Batman.
Knight trilogy,
Yeah,
and so that was my introduction to Christopher Nolan. And when you're talking
yeah.
about like his vision for cinematography too, I think about
Oh, that
you
was
know
brilliant.
scenes in Batman that were just beautiful that you
Pure
stop
art.
and you're like,
Just
this is a Batman movie.
yeah,
Why?
you could literally pause it, and that and if,
Yeah.
wherever it was could be a piece of art on its own.
That's right. That's right. So I was introduced to him in that way. I loved Inception. I even liked all the way back to like Insomnia. I liked
Yeah.
his stuff. Um,
Mm,
but uh, but yeah, it's and the Prestige I think is very good. I think some of the later films are harder to get behind because there's
right.
so much focus on the mind bending aspect, and I think there is some value to sometimes telling a linear story and help it and walking the audience through where you expect them to arrive. And so
Yeah.
I think he did a good job with that in Dunkirk. You know, that was very well received. I'm not a
Dunkirk
big
was pretty
war
good. Yeah,
movie
I liked it.
fan
Yep, I liked it.
with myself. Yeah, but I did enjoy it because but I think part of that was we kind of got the story. So
Yeah.
uh,
So I'm curious, since you mentioned the
yeah,
Dark Knight,
yeah,
and what do you think is his fascination with the two sides of people? So Dark Knight, you got
yeah.
Batman, Bruce Wayne, Two
Hmm.
Face is in that, where we
Hmm.
see visually see two sides, and in this we have characters who are existing in two different ways almost
Mhm.
constantly and sometimes interacting. What do you think
Yeah.
is his there does seem to be a fascination with him of the two-sidedness of of individuals. And did you see
Sure.
that between Dark Knight and this? And what's that all about? Why do you think he keeps coming back to that theme?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, even with the Prestige, I mean,
Mhm.
we see people who appear one way and end up
Yep.
being something else. I think he's speaking about the duality of humanity,
Yeah.
and each person's capacity to do good things and bad things. And
Mm.
I agree. I think this does seem to be a preoccupation of his, and to really explore what happens if we feed the good wolf or the bad wolf,
Right.
as the saying goes. Which
Yeah.
what is it that about humanity that makes us good or bad, and what's that like for us? Well,
Mm.
do you have thoughts, Mark,
No,
on what the
I
duality is
think
about?
that's part of it. I wonder. I would love to hear more of his personal story. I wonder if there's something going
Hmm.
on where he's exploring something personally. Because yes, I think that it is a recognition of the duality of humanity and his attempt to uncomplicate it a little bit by breaking it out and just showing one side and the other side, kind of capsulized versions rather than having to deal with the messiness of how it really is of that we have these different parts of who we are always interacting and we're having to decide, as you point out, which part of us is going to win out in every moment,
Hmm.
any given moment. And he's seems to be trying to make that a clearer choice for us so that we can process it a little better. Maybe definitely in the
Yeah,
Dark Knight that's part of what's going on.
absolutely.
Here's a maybe in a more grayish area, but it is sort of two people that are working towards different ends because they're working in different directions and times.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right, and I think we also should just say that it is a fun movie and an entertaining movie, and
Hmm.
the action scenes are incredible. And
Incredible.
I mean, I mean, the fact that one person is fighting forward in time and the other person is fighting backwards in time, and sometimes they're fighting themselves and don't know it. I think perhaps that's
Unbelievable.
a
That
similar metaphor.
we're probably thinking of the same scene where he's shooting through
Yeah.
the glass on the two sides.
Uh huh.
And
Yep.
that was I sat there the whole time going, how do you film that? How do
Right.
you conceptualize it? But then how do you film it so that you can
Yeah.
tell the story in both time directions? That was brilliant.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't understand
Yeah.
what it meant, but it was brilliant.
Oh, well, Mark, you know what? There are, confusing nature of this movie aside, there are a lot of theological aspects to it and political aspects. And I think maybe it's time that we turn our focus towards those areas. So let's take a quick break and let's come back for our Theopolitico segment.
Hello, welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for a Theo Politico segment where we're talking about the movie Tenet. So I'm probably going to go in some slightly unexpected spaces here, Caleb,
Ooh,
but I
okay.
think they're justified in parts of what the film is doing. One of the things that I kept thinking about, particularly, is his name Sater or Satter. I always
Hmm.
mispronounce his name. One of the things in thinking about him is sort of for me that death is basically supposed to be an inescapable reality of time,
Hmm.
and he's kind of playing with that ultimately. And in part, I think the movie is about escaping that reality, at least in terms of addressing that character, the desire to escape that reality. And so I've got a two-part question. The first part
Okay.
is that desire to escape the reality that death is inescapable in terms of time, is that something that we should want, And then, in what ways do you think traditional Christian theology has been about escaping death, escaping that reality? And then I'm going to have a follow up to that as well. Of course, I
So this is really a three-part question. Is that what you're saying,
it
Mark?
might be a 4-part question in the long run.
Wow.
We're
Wow.
going to wait and let that. We're going to build the anticipation. We're going to build the
Okay. Yeah,
anticipation
I can't
of whether
wait.
it could be or not.
I'm on the edge of my seat here.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, so it's not something that we should want. I think
Right.
a lot of people really have a hard time dealing with death and
Yeah.
aging and death and the possibility that we will all die. No one makes it out of this life alive. We're all going to die.
Life is a
And
terminal illness.
I hear that as soon as you're born, you start dying. Do we have any other cliches we can throw at it?
I don't know. I can't come up with any right now. I was
Can't
trying
come
though.
up
I was
with any
really
later.
trying.
So yeah, I mean, human beings struggle with the finiteness of life, and
Mhm.
we have trouble with that. And so traditional Christianity has tried to provide an answer in talking about the afterlife, and I think to its disservice, much of Christianity has ended up being exclusively about the afterlife, about
Mhm.
not living in this world, but preparing our whole lives to go to what's next, whatever that
Right.
is. And so I feel like that's a mistake. I don't think that that's what Jesus talked much about. First
Sure.
century Judaism was not particularly concerned with an afterlife. And although there was a growing movement concerned with the afterlife in the first century, it's not clear what relation Jesus had to that. And Jesus seemed to be talking much more about creating a reformed social order in the here and now. In treating people equitably and fairly in the here and now. So I think
Yeah.
that Christianity has done a bit of a disservice in helping us think about the sacredness of the hours that we have here on this earth and what it is. I'm going to be interested after your follow-up question to hear what you have to say about that, because I know you've been thinking a lot about reintegration of afterlife
Well,
into Christian
can come
theology.
back to we can come back to
Yeah.
some of that, but I actually I agree with you. I feel like um, Christianity has definitely done a disservice in focusing
Hmm.
so much in this very defined afterlife where
Hmm.
we are almost I literally got asked this Sunday from a person who was part of a different group that was in the church who said, "Oh, well, you're the minister," and yeah, I'm the minister here. And his question was to help him understand if cremation was okay, because when Gabriel comes back and blows his horn, um, there's going to be a bodily resurrection, and what happens to those who have been cremated. And so there is this disservice that Christianity has done in terms of at least traditional theology of there being this bodily resurrection and what that means and what it does to us. I mean, that traditional Christian idea of the afterlife, it seems to me it reduces the urgency of consequential things in this life, does it not? I mean, and
Uh,
this movie kind of points to how what we've seen. It doesn't specifically talk about it, but we're talking about climate change in the movie, and it does seem to me that that traditional Christian idea of this even bodily resurrection is that we get to continue to live in this beautiful, amazing place where we don't have to worry about this planet. I mean, doesn't
yeah.
it feel like there's some damage that happens in the here and now because of that?
Oh, absolutely. Especially whenever we pair this focus on the afterlife with a thought that there's some kind of a second coming of Christ
Right.
that will be kind of the end of the world as we know it. And so there are certain things that groups believe have to happen, including subjugation of the earth and
Yeah.
even destruction of the earth. And so some fundamentalist Christians, I don't think most Christians, but I think some fundamentalist Christians believe that actually destroying the earth hastens the end times and that it's actually a faithful thing to do. That is the definition of bad theology, by the way. and
Right.
one of the dangers of not knowing
Right.
the
Yeah.
the social and historical context of the text. But there are Christians who when you pair those things together, are doing active destruction to the earth. And I think that's one of the examples of how religion can really be a bad thing if it's left
Absolutely.
unchecked. So
Absolutely. All right. We took a side road there. Here's my follow-up question
that's right.
about
That's right.
trying
You've
to
got two
escape.
or three more questions, right?
All right. About trying to escape death. Like it
Okay.
is this human desire. We see it in this movie. We just talked about how even Christianity tries to present some kind of image of how you escape actual death. This is more of a philosophical question.
Mhm.
Why do you think that it is so important to humans to escape death? Is there something about living a full life here that even a full life ends up that we find or see it as incomplete in some way? Is there some what is the reason behind that? Is it fear? Is it that we see life as somehow incomplete even if it's lived to its fullest? What do you think's going on in our need to escape death? And then I might have a follow-up question to that.
I think to some degree it depends on the person and what their own life experience has been, and if it is someone who maybe is afraid of death. I mean, I think maybe for many people there is some fear of the unknown, of what waits beyond or not, or is this all I've got? I think that for some folks, there is a genuine love of life and a genuine desire for life to continue as it is. I think for some people, and I think this can be particularly true for people who have had a tough life or from marginalized communities, and that
Mhm.
is that. There's a hope that things will be better in another life. And so I gave a sermon a year or so ago where I was talking about the afterlife and said, well,
Mhm.
you can believe whatever you want. I'm not sure I really believe in this way. And so
Right.
someone from a marginalized community came up to me afterwards and said, but how about those of us who have had to suffer through this life
Right.
because of systems of oppression, and for our communities, this has been a hope that, hey, things aren't right in the here and now, but they're going to be
Mhm.
right in the sweet by and by. What about that? Are you
Right.
taking that hope away from us? And I mean, my answer was, I think still believe whatever you want, whatever is hopeful to you. But I also
Absolutely.
think that that can be an escape from working on real concrete change in the here and now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for instance, if we're talking about Black communities, right? I mean, white slavers use the promise of an afterlife as a tool for
Mhm.
manipulation to say, hey, you know what? I know things suck here. That's okay
But
because
it's
you're gonna,
temporary and
yeah, it's temporary. You're gonna be rewarded later on. So I think you got to be careful with that too.
yeah. No,
Uh,
I completely agree.
what do you
And
think?
that kind of leads into my
Okay.
follow-up question, frankly,
Okay.
which is what should we be doing to help all of us see
Hmm.
this life as sufficient, as rewarding, as enough, and not to have to place so much emphasis on how incredible the afterlife is. Because frankly, we don't know
Hmm.
what the afterlife is, and we do at some point need to reimagine from the traditional Christian understanding of what it might or might not be a more realistic understanding, and that may or may not be something that gives hope. And so my question is, what do we need to be doing now so that hope is not so necessary in the afterlife?
I think that this is a place where we can learn from other religious traditions. And so we
Mhm.
don't have to think that Christianity has all the answers, because I think in this particular aspect, it doesn't. And
Right.
so I think particularly of Buddhism, where the goal is to escape the life, right? This goal is to
Yes.
escape the life cycle because there's this thought of reincarnation, and your goal is to reach nirvana and to escape the rebirthing process. And so it is a recognition that we should be grateful for every moment, that we should be living in the moment, and that we should detach from the things that hold us to this life. I think there's some wisdom in that, and
Yeah.
kind of recognizing that this moment is the moment that we have, that the things that are behind us don't exist anymore. They are things that are behind us. The things that are in the future also don't exist. Both of those are concepts and constructs within our
Hmm.
minds, but they
Yeah.
are not concrete realities. The only concrete reality is right now. So pay attention to your breath, pay attention to what's going on, and be here in this moment. There's a lot of wisdom to that.
Absolutely.
I think especially when you pair it with some of the ethical teachings of Christianity, that there's some wisdom in that. But that's just my answer. Do you have a great solution to this question, Mark? Because this is one of
Well,
the big questions of life,
it is.
right?
It is. It
Yeah.
is a big question of life. And I don't know that I have the answer or a answer as much as I do believe that the teachings of Jesus, in terms of who we're supposed to be in the here and now, are solutions to not needing as much hope in the future. If we could all follow the teachings, if we can all recognize the value of all life, the interconnectedness of all life, and to begin to work even more diligently on making sure that people aren't marginalized, making sure that their lives are valued and recognized and celebrated. I feel like that is I in a lot of ways I feel like what we push into the future or into the afterlife gives us a little much too much leeway in the present to not have to address things like social justice and climate change. Um, I don't know that I have an answer that says this is how we prevent it, but I do think that what we need to be doing is focusing on the here and now and creating realities where folks don't need to push their hope into the future. Because if we value life, hope needs to be in the here and now, and we need to be doing the work that makes hope a real present possibility.
Hmm. That sounds good to me.
Well, we could go on, and I had several more questions to ask, but I would much rather uh, move on to the next segment where I get to hopefully ask you a question that makes you look stupid.
Hello, and welcome to our final segment of the Moonshine Jesus Show, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, where Mark almost always makes me look
No,
stupid.
no.
But you know what? I'm gonna ask you a question today, Mark,
All
and
right.
it's one
All
I
right.
don't know if it's gonna make you look stupid, but
It
it
probably
is
will.
something that I'm curious to know about, and
Mm.
I want to know your take on this.
All right.
So the antagonist, Satyr, says, "My greatest sin was to bring a son into the world when I knew it was dying."
Yeah.
And he says, "Do you think God will forgive me?" So there's a line that I think is worth thinking about a little
Mm.
bit, because
Yeah.
we have this record human population. We see that the Earth is being affected by climate change, and that is being affected by more human beings on the Earth.
Mhm.
And there's
Mhm.
this growing movement. I don't know if you saw this article in the New York Times recently, a growing movement of people who think we should let human beings go extinct. So here's what I want to know, Mark. Is there value in that, and viewing human beings like any other species that maybe should be allowed to run their course? Is there something to be said for voluntary extinction? Is there something to be said for population control? And are there theological aspects of that? That's what I want to know, Mark. I'm curious.
Boy, that's a lot of questions that I don't have answers to.
I'm just gonna
So
throw it. You asked me like a 5-part question
fair,
earlier, so
that's
I'm just
fair,
gonna
that's
throw.
fair,
I'm not gonna build
that's
any
fair,
suspense. I'm throwing them all out there at you
that's
at
fair,
once. Okay.
that's fair. Let me see if I can figure out how to approach any of those. Is there
Oh, okay.
value?
You're thinking about it, Mark. I'm feeling good about this set of questions.
Is there value? Is there value to human extinction, or or even self-imposed human extinction? No. Who cares if the human race survives? If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That is life. That is death, and the ending of human individuals, of races, happens. That is part of what goes on. Should we care about it? Yeah, of course. We should care about trying to have that not happen. There is value in humanity. There is value in what we have become, and in our ability to process and think about life and to understand our relationship with the other. There is value in sharing love and trying to care about each other. There's even value in the negative chaos that we create. In a lot of ways, this movie is about entropy, of moving towards this constant increasing chaos, but trying to understand it and figure out who we are within all of it. So no, I don't think there's any real value in an intentional extinction of humanity. We lose so much of what is good in the world. Even some of the things that we think of as negative and bad aren't can be seen as less than negative and bad, as much as things that we learn from and process and make humanity better from in our best moments. So I don't think that is a good thing, and I don't think it's anything we should work towards. It's also nothing we should fear if it happens.
How about population control?
Population control becomes a bigger question for me. Is, are we willing to share what we have?
Hmm.
Population control is not necessary if we're not hoarding goods. Right now, even
Ah.
at our incredible rate of growth and the immense amount of people that live on the planet actually currently still produces enough to care for everyone. The problem is humanity doesn't produce enough compassion to care for everyone, a willingness to distribute those goods in a fair and equitable way. So no, I'm also not a big fan of population control, at least not right now. I think that that's a very simple solution to a problem that has to do with people's greed, and I'm not willing to sacrifice the experience of new life so that someone can have as much greed as they want. That's bullshit. I'm not going there. I don't know. What do you think, man?
Yeah, so I think it's ethically problematic to think that voluntary termination of the species is something that people are going to get behind. So I think that's a crazy position. No one's going to
Right.
get behind that,
No.
other than a few fanatics. I mean, obviously, we all share the concern of climate change, but I think that and I agree in terms of population control and all. I do think there, though, that one thing that Christianity can do to help with population
Mhm.
control is to take away some of the unhelpful theology regarding sex and procreation. And so
Absolutely.
recognizing
Absolutely.
that, like, using various forms of birth control is not contrary to the Christian faith, but is something that is absolutely fine. I think that
Yes.
if churches do a better job of sex education and talking about how it is that we can engage in birth control kinds of things, I think that that's a respectful way to begin addressing the problem as well. So and in theological terms, we do often talk about the earth being an earth of abundance, and that
Yes.
there is always enough. It's just whether or not we're going to share. So I love that response. Okay, I love it, Mark. Thank you for helping me unpack all of those
I
questions,
don't.
all like 50 of those questions. I appreciate
I
that.
don't know. I don't know if I even managed to make a dent in the most of the questions, but at least I'm always willing to give my opinion, though. That you're very well aware of.
I love it.
All right, so
I love it.
my turn.
Yep.
My turn, right?
hmm
And
hmm
since you asked multiple questions, I'm
You're
going to
gonna do
use
it
that as
too.
permission. I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to do a follow-up question.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
the question is based on this movie. So ultimately, this movie is about finding a way to change the past so that we have an escape route when we mess things up. My question is there an actual meaning for life if we have an escape route, a way to change the past? Is there meaning in life if we can always go back and change the past to reshape it?
No, and I think they hint at this to some degree. And I mean, obviously, Tenet is the group that is not wanting to change the past, even though
Hmm.
they're utilizing going back in the past
Right.
to fight people.
To
But
change the
but
past, to change
to change the
what they're trying to
past,
change.
right? One of the confusing nature of all of this, but one of their phrases that they say is "What has happened," even in the way that they've addressed changing the past. And I think that that's right. What
Mm,
has happened. There is currently no way to change the past, and even if there were, I don't think that that helps us to deal with life as it is. So I think part of living is recognizing our current reality. And our current reality is made by what has happened in the past, both
no,
what has happened to us and the things that we have done to others. And it is in grappling with that that we deal with our own sense of reality. So, no, I don't think I don't think there's meaning to life if we could go back and redo everything. That's
right?
more of a
So
nostalgic kind of view of
absolutely.
well,
So
okay,
that leads directly into my follow-up question,
okay.
because I completely agree with you. If we have an escape route to change the past, then where's the value? Where's there any meaning in life? So knowing that that's you and I both pretty much jumped to that conclusion. I don't think anyone listening probably went, "Oh, y'all are crazy." They probably went, "Yeah, that makes so much sense. I agree."
No, I want to go back and change everything.
So,
Yeah, okay.
so the question though is, if that is the truth, and if it's a truth that
Mhm.
we can all leap to pretty quickly without a lot of argument, why do we spend so much time regretting the past and wishing we could change it and end up in these unhealthy mental places because of it? Why do we do
I
that?
think I think that's part of the paradoxical aspect of human nature, right?
Mm,
We all wonder about what could be or what might have been, and I think our language about changing the past often has to do with that. Our
no,
envisioning a different life or a different kind of life, or not being satisfied with what is. And I think this relates to what I was talking about earlier, that it really has to do with being grounded in the present moment and recognizing that these realities that we're creating in our minds aren't realities at all. They're
right.
just fantasies that we're talking about. So I think it's human nature to wonder about what might have been, but I think we can get into dangerous territory really quickly whenever we start an obsession with what
Mm,
might have been, and we pinpoint a particular moment that
right.
caused our life to be the way it is, for better or for ill, when in reality, it's often a whole set of experiences that have led to this point. So I think it's human nature, but I think it can be dangerous. What's
No,
your take on it, Mark?
no, I agree. I think part of it is that religions of all sorts and philosophies even
Yeah.
try to set up this good and bad dichotomy. And
Mm,
we try to define what's good in life and what's bad in life rather than just recognizing that life is and
mm,
experiencing it and trying to make the most of it as it happens. And there is a part of us that need to recognize the past has happened. We made the best choices that we could make in the moment. We need to give ourselves that space to say, while I might make a different choice now, back then I made the choice I had to make based on my realities, my experience, my
mm.
knowledge, and that is what happened. And not judge it as good or bad, just recognize it as life and life happening. and kind of going back to that being in the moment of this moment in life of breathing in, breathing out, and saying, this is where I am. This is who I am. My past has influenced me arriving here. That's not good or bad. It is what it is. And all I can do is experience it, learn from it, and move forward based on it. And I think we need to do a better job just in general of helping each other understand that that's okay. It's not just okay, it's good. And it's what life is about. And in a lot of ways, that is the meaning of life, is to experience it in its fullness and to not judge it, but to always try to learn from it and make it better moving forward.
That sounds wonderful, Mark. I love that thought of life being what it is and us making the best decisions in the moment. And as they say, that'll preach, Mark. That sounds pretty good. I like that. So we've had enough mind bending for today, I think, with
Yeah,
Tenet.
absolutely.
And, so let's talk about what we're going to watch next week. So this week, we're planning to watch a show called Blaze. Do you know anything about it, Mark?
I know a little bit about it. I've watched the trailer for it. It came out last year, and it's really unusual. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but I will read this one description. It says, after a young girl witnesses a violent crime, she summons an imaginary dragon to help process her anger and protect her on her journey into womanhood. And I can tell you, there is a lot of investigation in terms of what I'm reading about it, about how traumatic events can impact us and how we deal with them and live with them. And this looks really unusual. It looks very creative. There's a lot of imagination, and it's almost working with where our imagination can go to darker places, and also though how it can help us through a difficult time. So it looks like it could be very interesting. It is really highly rated by critics, and viewers are not so sure. So it should be fun to try to delve into why there's such a discrepancy there.
Yeah, that'll be a fascinating discussion, I'm sure. It's always very interesting when critics land one place and the audience land another place. So then in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about Ant-Man, Quantumania, and Mark and I know we've both been looking forward to this for quite a while. So we're hoping that then this starts a series of new releases of films, because the last month or so has been a little bit dry. So
it's been a struggle to find. Yeah, it's definitely been a struggle. Figure out what we should be talking about.
But there's lots of good stuff coming out this spring and this summer, and I can't wait to talk about it with you, man. I had a great time today, as usual.
Me too.
Cheers.
I wasn't sure going into Tenet that we would end up in good places, but I really appreciated the discussion.
You know, it was one of those. I'm glad. I've got to tell you, Mark, I was really relieved whenever we talked today for you to say, I'm not sure that I knew what this meant, and I thought, thank God, it wasn't just me. I just thought I was really dense on this one.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way.
We both were. So it was both of us, you know.
Absolutely.
Cheers to you, Mark. Cheers to all of you out there. And we can't wait to see you next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine